Hi everybody. So today we are going to talk about dollars and cents as they relate to decimals. So we're going to start off with a little review of some of the things we touched on yesterday with our two-place decimals. So you'll see in this picture, this is a square that is divided up into 100 little squares, and I have shaded in 40 of them. So that's why underneath here I've written 40 hundredths. But there is also a way to write this as tenths. So if I wanted to write 40 hundredths as a fraction out of 10. If I look at my picture and instead of seeing this as 100 boxes, I just see it as 10 columns, think to myself, how many of the columns are shaded in? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 40 hundredths can also be expressed as 4 tenths. So if I was going to write this as a decimal, I could write 0.40, which is how I would think of 40 hundredths, but I could also write it as 0.4. I can drop that last zero off when I'm writing a decimal. It's not necessary to have that on the end. So here I have 70 hundredths. So using the same kind of image in our mind, if we're thinking about 70 hundredths, how could we express that out of tenths? So the answer here is 7. So that means for a decimal, I could write it as 0.70, but I could also write it just like 0.7. I want you to now think about these next two. How could I write 50 hundredths as a fraction out of 10, and then what would those be as decimals? And how could I write 30 hundredths as a fraction out of 10, and what would those be as decimals? Give those a try. So for the first one, if you were thinking that 50 hundredths is 5 out of 10, you would be right. So to write that as a decimal, we could write 0.50, and we could also write 0.5. They mean the same exact thing. This one is a little bit simpler because I don't have to write that zero on the end. And here for 30 hundredths, that is the same as 3 tenths. So I could write that as 0.30, and I could also write that as 0.3. Now you may have noticed a pattern here. All of these numbers ended in 0. And that's the only time that this is going to work. If the number ends in a 1, a 2, a 3, all the way up to 9, you're not going to be able to write it as something out of 10. But if it ends in a 0, you could convert it to a fraction out of 10, and you could write the decimal either way. So let's try some examples here where there is not a second option for how to write it, but we do have a picture to help us a little bit. So here I have a picture and a mixed number of 1 and 28 hundredths. So to write that as a decimal, I'm first going to write the number 1 and my decimal point, because I have one whole, and then I have 28 hundredths, so I'm going to follow that with 28. Now this one sometimes tricks people a little bit. Here I have 2 wholes and I have 5 hundredths. So I know to write my 2 because there's 2 wholes and then my decimal, but it's only 5 hundredths. Sometimes people think that they should put the 5 here, but that would be like saying there were 5 tenths, which there's not. So to write 5 hundredths, I would need to write 2.05. Try this one on your own. What is 2 and 35 hundredths written as a decimal? If you were thinking it's 2.35, you would be correct. So now we're going to start talking about some money. So let's just review some concepts about money that we know. So we know that in $1, and this is how we properly write out $1 using the dollar sign. So we have $1, decimal point, 0, 0. And this literally means I have $1 and I have no cents, no extra cents. $1 is equal to 100 cents. A cent is a penny. So if you think how many pennies would I need to get to $1, the answer would be 100. So I could write this as $1 with my dollar sign here. I also can write it as 100 cents with my cent sign here. So I then could say that 1 cent or 1 penny is 1/100th of a dollar. Let's think about why. If I have 1 penny in my hand, there's the 1, that's out of the 100 pennies that I would need to make a dollar. So 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar. Okay? Here I have 10 cents. Okay, so 10 cents is 10/100ths of a dollar. Because if I have 10 pennies or if I have a dime, I have 10 out of the 100 that I need to get to a dollar. Now, from what we learned before, we know we could also say that 10 cents is 1/10 of a dollar. This is clearer understood if you think about it in terms of a dime. If I have 1 dime, I need 10 of them to get to a dollar. So 10 cents is 1/10 of a dollar. Therefore, if I want to write 10 cents as a decimal, I could write it as 0.10. Now, you might be thinking, oh, you could also write it as 0.1 based on what we already learned. That doesn't work in money because in money, you have to have 2 places past the decimal point. So just remember that. I can't drop the 0 here because we're talking about money and money always has 2 places after the decimal point. So let's try a couple of these. So here we have 1 cent. There's 2 ways to write it, right? We could write 1 cent or we could write $0.01. So we know 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar. So here if we want to fill in the fraction, 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar. Over here, 10 cents. So we could write it this way or this way. And 10 cents is 1/10 of a dollar, just like we talked about up top. Okay, so now we're thinking about 20 cents. So if I have 20 cents and I want to know how many tenths that is, I want to think about it in terms of dimes because it's 10 dimes to a dollar. So 20 cents is 2/10 of a dollar. And if I wanted to write it out, 0.20 with the dollar sign or 20 cents. Here, 50 cents is blank out of 10 of a dollar. So again, it's out of 10, so I'm going to think about it like dimes. If I have 50 cents, that means I have 5/10 of a dollar. And some of you might be thinking that 5/10 is equal to a half, which is true. 50 cents is half of a dollar. So I could write it like this. I could also write 0.50. Remembering that I can't drop that 0 because we're talking about money. Okay, here, 45 cents is blank out of 100 of a dollar. So now it's out of 100, so I'm thinking of how many pennies is that? It's 45 pennies of a dollar, or 0.45, which is 45 cents. Over here, 26 cents, so I'm thinking how many pennies out of 100 is that? It's 26 pennies. So 26 hundredths of a dollar. I could write it as 26 cents like that. I could also write $0.26. Okay, so this says write each of the following amounts of money as a decimal. So we're going to write these as decimals. So for letter A, I have $3.85. So as a decimal, that's going to be my 3 wholes, because dollars are like wholes. I'm going to need my decimal point there. 85 cents is like 85 hundredths. So that would be 3.85. Okay, for B, to write that as a decimal, I have $6. So I'm going to do the 6 in the decimal point. And then I have 50 cents. So I'm going to write 50. Remember, you can't drop that 0 because it's money. So you're going to leave the 0 there. Letter C, $8.05. So I'm going to be careful here. Here's my 8 wholes. Here's my decimal. It's only 5 cents. So I'm going to write 0.5 because 5 cents is 5 hundredths of a dollar. And then for letter D, $85. I can just write like that. Since it's money, I'm going to put decimal point 00. Since with money, we usually write the dollars and cents, and in this situation, we don't have any cents, so it'd be 85 decimal point 00. Okay, today for independent work, you're going to work in your workbook on page 22. You could do all of that. Page 23, you can do all of that. And then on page 24, you're only going to do number 4, which is the second half of the page. Good luck.